Hello YouTube, it's Lang here with Hobbies of a Man once again, and today we are doing another manga review. Today we are reviewing Bestiarius volumes 1 through 7. This is a complete series, and Bestiarius is written by Masasumi Kakisaki, who is an artist, a mangaka that has amazing stuff in his portfolio that we just don't see here in the English-speaking West, which kind of sucks because he's so good. You know, if you like Berserk and if you like Vinland Saga, you'll probably like the stuff that he works on because his art style is very similar to those two, somewhere in between them. And his subject matter is also kind of quite similar. And so I think that it's a very good mangaka that we just don't see in English. And so that's why I wanted to do this review. This is my Mexican series, and this is, or my Mexican collection of the series. Recently bought it and I really liked it, so I wanted to kind of review it and bring it to y'all's attention, so we can kind of start to see petitions for this guy to get his stuff published in English. So yeah, this specific edition is published by Panini Manga, as you guys can see right there. I don't know if it'll focus, I don't think so. But like I said, this Panini Manga, this is the Mexican edition. Panini actually publishes in quite a few different languages and in quite a few different Latin American locations, and so their editions are different location to location. But yeah, the demographic of this specific series is shonen, which is actually kind of weird because Masasumi Kakisaki is actually a seinen mangaka most of the time, and so we kind of get to see in the author's notes here that he did a shonen series because his editor asked him to, but he wanted to do just a gladiator series, but they told him that that wasn't like fantastical enough, so he just added mythical creatures, and that's where we get this kind of series from. So it's very interesting. The genre here is heroic fantasy, which is the kind of fantasy from the early days of pulp novels here in the US, stuff like Conan the Barbarian, John Carter of Mars, Knoll or Kroll, I can't remember, like all of the Edgar Rice Burroughs guys and all of the Conan the Barbarian kind of stuff. I can't remember the author's name, Robert something, and stuff like that, right? Like very like historic fantasy, very classic kind of old school stuff. All of the kind of comic book series that you see that have like fantasy elements, most of them are kind of heroic fantasy. And of course, this also has historical fantasy elements to it. Obviously, it has a historical time period, which is 86 years after the birth of Christ, during this kind of like tumultuous time period in the Roman Empire. We get to see gladiators fight, and we also see mythical creatures, like I mentioned earlier. We have dragons and golems and elves and dwarfs and everything that you can really think of, and you know, a lot of Greek creatures as well, and it's really enjoyable. So yeah, this does not have an adaptation. I think Masasumi Kakisaki's works don't really lend themselves to adaptations, since most of them are kind of really adult, but also not popular enough compared to Vinland Saga and Berserk and stuff like that to kind of be turned into anime, but they are very good, so you know, don't let that kind of pull you away from it. So premise-wise, this is kind of difficult to condense into a paragraph, a sentence or two, but it's basically a collection of short stories. It's not anthological, like it's not an anthology, but the first 3 volumes kind of do feel like that. It's a collection of short stories that are interconnected by location and time. So you know, we get to see the first story in volume 1, and then the second story in volume 1 are kind of similar, but they happen at different time periods in the same place. And then we get to see volume 2, which happens in a different location, but then leads back into Rome, right? And they're all interconnected. You know, all the characters show up in all of the other kind of stories. And so it's kind of interesting, but it basically follows different groups of gladiators and their mythical creature companions as they kind of rebel against Rome and try to create a place where they can be free. And it's kind of interesting because it kind of combines elements of Gladiator and Braveheart and stuff like that. And it also combines elements of the Arthurian legend. This idea that there's a guy that can carve out a kingdom that is allowed to exist by the Romans in what is, Albion, what is Roman-controlled England. So it's very interesting, actually. I thought it was very well done and very kind of well mixed together. But let's get into the actual review. It's been 5 minutes and I still haven't gotten into it. So the plotline here is good. It's actually divided into different kind of groups of volumes. So the first volume contains the book of ties and has 2 separate stories. The first one is the first half of the book, and the second one is obviously the second half of the book. The first one deals with the introduction of our major characters, Durendal and Finn. Durendal is the last wyvern, and Finn is this kind of Germanic boy, as far as I can tell, who is the son of a Germanic turned Roman legionnaire that died. And there's like this connection between Durendal and Finn that is kind of familial, right? And then the second story deals with Zeno and Talos, which are a man and a minotaur who also kind of have these interesting familial ties that the Romans find kind of appalling, because Romans are very kind of like, oh no, only humans should deal with humans, and only Romans are true humans. Everyone else is like below them, right? So it's kind of interesting. But that's what this book deals with. Volumes 2 and 3 are the book of friendship, and it deals with 4 characters. It deals with Arthur and Elaine and Pan the satyr and Galahad the goblin elf kind of guy. I actually don't know what thing he is, but I'm pretty sure he's like an elf of some sort. And it deals with, Romans attacking a little place in England and then leading to this adventure and this kind of revenge story that deals with these characters. Elaine is taken away, and then everyone else wants to go find her, and so they kind of become warriors in order to be able to go and attack Rome. And it's actually very good. I actually really like this one. Then we have volume 4 and 5, which cover the book of pride. I always have to think about what orgullo means in English. It's pride, or like confidence, I guess. It depends on the context, I guess. But volumes 4 and 5 deal with this Roman legionnaire going to attack Hebden, which is a little place in Britain, and this kind of dissolution that he has with the Roman Empire, and then becoming a freedom fighter, kind of getting over the fact that he's a legionnaire and kind of turning against the Roman Empire. And again, we get to see gladiators and fights and rebel alliances and different kind of things that all tie in together with all of the different characters. We also get to see this very interesting mythical creature, which is a golem, which is a Jewish mythological creature, which is very interesting. And then we have volume 6, which is the book of determination, and this one deals with characters kind of getting to a point where they're just like, no, we have to stop, we have to finally push back against Rome, right? And then we get introduced to this other character that's half human, half dark elf, and this chimera character, which are kind of interesting because these guys end up being kind of like antithetical to Durendal and Finn. They kind of end up being 2 sides of the same coin in this kind of very like good versus evil of the same thing, right? It's very interesting. Now, book 7 is Book of Heroes. This kind of ties in all of these stories back together again and kind of creates the final, confrontation between all the characters. And it actually is very, very good. It ends up being a wonderful story, right? And I had to break it down that way because it doesn't really follow a traditional kind of like arc leading into another arc kind of style that most manga do, because this was written somewhat anthologically, right? The mangaka talks about how he doesn't really work on this consistently. He kind of works on it at different places in different time periods throughout like working on his other stuff. And so it's kind of interesting that kind of changes how the story is structured because of how he was developing it. So it's very interesting. But generally, it's a very well, narrated story. Even though even though it is kind of simple, I mean, there really isn't much to it. It's a classic kind of like gladiator-esque combination of stories that all tie in together into this larger narrative. And I really liked it. It's very good. Now, characters-wise, I think there's really good stuff here. Finn and Durandal are very much the like cranky mentor and ideological shonen lead, right? Early on. Then they become more kind of like the jaded older guy characters, as we get to see Arthur and Elaine and Galad and Pan become the shonen protagonist characters, right? And then we get Zeno and Talos, who don't really fit into any kind of like shonen archetype specifically, but they're more like the edgy anti-hero kind of characters that really aren't there very often. And then we have a bunch of other characters, right? We have Dominatius, which is the Roman emperor. We have Lucius, who is the legionnaire turned good guy. And then Domitia, which is the empress. And Cyrus, which is the dark elf guy. And it's very interesting. Like, all of the ways that all of these characters interact is very interesting, right? There's a power dynamic with the Roman people, right? And then there's this kind of like love-hate relationship between Lucius and all the other characters. And then there's this kind of like master and student kind of relationship between Finn and Arthur and Elaine, right? And Galahad and Pan and stuff like that. So like the way all of the characters tie together is very, very interesting and very well done. I actually really like it. I don't think it's very complex. Like I said, this is not a very complex story. This is very much just like cool action, somewhat good storytelling, and somewhat good theme elements here. But it's mostly just about really cool art, really cool fights, and like a good like heroic fantasy story. Very much in line with old school pulp fantasy. So I like it a lot, right? World building wise, it's great. The mythical creatures and the gladiators mesh so well together. It makes so much sense, right? Because in ancient Rome, there was gladiators that would fight animals, right? There was like those guys that would fight bears and lions and wolves and stuff like that in the Colosseum. And so this is just taking that to a different level, where you don't only fight other humans, but you also end up fighting mythical creatures, right? And you get to fight demi-humans, right? Which is what they call these like humanoid, human level intelligence creatures that are not humans. But you also get like more traditional evil monsters, right? So it's kind of interesting. It's very well done. There's a wonderful kind of style to it, right? That is just very interesting. It kind of combines all of the different mythologies of all these different places, because the Romans conquered all of Europe, right? So they could have access to all sorts of different monsters and mythologies if all of these monsters existed in real life. So it's very, very well done. I think the world building is good. I don't think it's very complex. Again, this is not a complex story, but it's just nicely done, and I like it a lot. Art-wise, it's amazing. I think this is the best aspect of the story. And I really like that these have color pages, because you get to see just like how cool things look. I'm gonna cover this in case anyone's reads Spanish, right? But look at that, that's so amazing. I'm sorry for the glare, but look at that, that's so cool. Finn is such a badass, right? This is from the last book. Let me show you the beginning. Good to see very cool backgrounds and very interesting facial expressions. And let me see if I can find the color page in the middle of the volume so you guys can see some of the creature work, right? The design of these characters is so cool, so badass. And the amount of time that this mangaka takes to kind of create his works is very amazing, because apparently he did most of this in traditional pen and paper. So it's kind of crazy that he has so much like detail and so much like stuff in it, even though it was just on paper, right? So, I mean, he does, I think, eventually transition into digital because his hands start to like get arthritis or something. He has health problems in his wrists and hands. And so he ends up transferring over to digital, but he just has very, very good artwork. The character design is good. The accuracy to kind of like medieval armor, and well, not medieval, like pre-medieval Roman style armor and stuff is very good. The creatures are amazing. And the coolest thing is that this guy doesn't even like video games and fantasy elements. Like, he just has them because his his editor told him to, right? So he just does this like without even liking it that much, and his creatures are designed so well. They have like easy to tell kind of tells to them that kind of show, yeah, this is a dragon, this is this and that, but they also have such a like different style to them that just isn't normal, right? Like, Galahad isn't really like a normal elf, even though he is one. That's not a very normal elf depiction. That's more like Dobby than it is, like the elves in Lord of the Rings. So it's very interesting. I just like the way he does his art. It's so good. And I definitely recommend it. I think it's very like enjoyable. Like I said, it's somewhere in between Vinland Saga and Berserk. And it has that kind of crazy, like super badass dark tones of Berserk, but it also has this very kind of nice, like not so angular, kind of a little bit more rounded style of Vinland Saga. So it's very good. I actually really like it. Very well done from Masasumi Kakisaki. Fanservice wise, I don't really think there is any. I mean, I think there's like 1 or 2 images where like Elaine looks like Red Sonja, which is, very kind of scantily clad warrior woman, but I wouldn't really call that fan service. I don't actually remember any like fan service elements here. There's very few female characters, and the few that are not very much like fan serviceable characters. Like Domitia, the Empress, is quite attractive. She looks very like beautiful, right? But there's never any moments where she would have like fan service happen, right? And Elaine, same thing. She is not really like that sort of character. So there really isn't any fan service. I think this is a really good one if you don't like fan service. I mean, however, there's a lot of violence and gore, so like it depends on what you're okay with and what you're not. So there you go. Now my rating here is a 5 out of 5. It's not the best written, like it's not really that complex. There really isn't too much that you can kind of suss out after you've read it once or twice. There's not that much thematic elements here, but I mean, that's not why I'm giving it a 5. I'm giving it a 5 because the art is amazing and because I really enjoyed this story for what it is. A very cool, fun, pulpy, fantasy, heroic story. And it's very well done. I really did enjoy it. It's a series that I think I'm going to read over and over again. I really like it. And yeah, 5 out of 5. I really enjoyed it. So yeah, I recommend it. I think that if you guys like Vinland Saga and Berserk and all of this type of stuff, which are also the similar titles, you'll probably like this. If you like Requiem of the Rose King, you might like this as well, but Requiem of the Rose King is a little bit more political. This isn't really about that. This is just more about fights. I mean, there's political aspects to it, and they have to occur in order for the story to happen, but that's really not the point here, right? So yeah. Also, Requiem of the Rose King is also a little bit more romantic in its kind of style because it's so Shakespearean. This isn't really like that, but it is kind of similar in style. So there you go. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. That's all I had to say for you guys. So if you did enjoy, please leave a like, subscribe, and comment down below. Let me know what you thought. And thank you guys so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. And yeah, see you guys later.